A couple arrived at town hall just seconds before closing time and caught the judge as he was about to leave. "Your Honor," they pleaded, "could you marry us today?" The judge asked. "Do you have a marriage license?" They looked at each other. "No." "Then you'll need to get one from the town clerk." They sprinted across the hall and caught the clerk just as he was locking the door. He sighed, reopened the office, and issued them a license. They rushed back to the judge. He looked it over, frowned, and said, "You've filled in the names backwards. His name is where hers should be, and hers is where his should be." Back they ran. The clerk grumbled but issued a new license. They hurried back to the judge. He examined it again. "Now the date is in the wrong format." Back to the clerk they went. By the time the paperwork had been corrected and reissued 5 times, everyone was exhausted. Finally, the judge smiled. "Everything is in order now." As he prepared to perform the ceremony, he added, "I hope you appreciate why I kept sending you back. If there are irregularities in the license, your marriage wouldn't be legal, and any children you had would technically be bastards." The groom nodded thoughtfully. "That's funny. That's exactly what the clerk called you." A blonde decided she needed some extra cash, so she started going door to door offering her services as a handyman. She knocked on the door of a large, expensive house. A man answered. "Hi," she said brightly. "I'm looking to earn a little extra money. Do you have any odd jobs that need doing?" He looked her over and smiled. "Can you paint?" "Sure can. I'll tell you what," he said. "If you paint my porch, I'll pay you $10. The paint and brushes are in the garage." "You've got it," she said, happily skipping off. The man's wife had overheard the conversation. "That's awful," she scolded. "Do you realize how huge that porch is? You're taking advantage of her." He just grinned. "I know." About 20 minutes later, the doorbell rang. The man opened the door to find the blonde standing there, splattered with paint. "All finished," she said with a smile. The man looked past her. The porch hadn't been touched. Confused, he asked, "Already?" "Yep," she replied. "It took a little longer because it was hard to paint around the mirrors." Then she added, "Oh, and by the way, that's not a Porsche. It's a Ferrari." Back in the Old West, a fellow of rather small stature decided it was time to prove just how tough he was. So he marched into the roughest, rowdiest saloon in town, walked up to the bar, and declared, "I'll have whatever all these hard cases are drinking." The bartender nodded, filled a frosty mug, and slid it across the bar. The little fellow took a long gulp, made a face, and shouted, "Yuck! This tastes like a horse peed in it." The saloon fell silent. Every cowboy slowly turned to look at him. Then the biggest, meanest, ugliest cowboy in the place strolled up to the bar, glared at the bartender, and growled, "You never told us there was beer in these mugs." 2 unemployed buddies were sitting around talking. One of them said, "I've decided I'm gonna become a lion tamer." His friend laughed. "You? That's crazy. You don't know the first thing about taming lions." "Sure I do." "Oh yeah? Then answer me this. When one of those lions comes charging at you, roaring with its teeth bared, what are you gonna do?" "I'll grab one of those big chairs lion tamers carry and stick it in the lion's face until he backs down." "All right, but what if the lion swats the chair with one big paw and sends it flying out of the cage?" "I'll grab my whip and crack it until he backs down." "And what if the lion bites the whip in half?" "I'll pull out my gun and shoot him." "And what if the gun misfires?" "I'll scoop up some of the crap on the floor of the cage, throw it in the lion's eyes, and make a run for it." His friend frowned. "What if there isn't any crap on the floor?" The would-be lion tamer looked at him and said, "You aren't thinking too clearly. If that lion knocks the chair away and bites my whip in half and my gun doesn't work, I guarantee you there's gonna be some crap on the floor of that cage." A young woman headed off to university and rented an apartment off campus. Since it was a long walk to class every day, she sent a telegram home asking her parents for enough money to buy a bicycle. Happy to help, her parents sent the money right away. The next day, while walking through town, she passed a pet shop and spotted the cutest little monkey she'd ever seen. As luck would have it, the monkey cost almost exactly what the bicycle would have. She couldn't resist. She bought the monkey instead and kept walking to class every day, figuring there was no reason to tell her parents. Everything went fine for about a month. Then the monkey developed a rash and started losing its fur. Not knowing what to do, she sent another telegram home. My monkey is losing its hair. What should I do? A reply came back almost immediately. Sell the bike. A poor woman called a local radio station and pleaded on the air for God's help. She had no food in the house and no money to feed her family. An arrogant, wealthy atheist happened to hear the broadcast and decided to make fun of her faith. He bought a huge load of groceries and told his secretary to deliver everything to the woman's house. But, he said with a grin, if she asks who sent it, tell her it came from the devil. The secretary delivered the groceries and watched as the woman joyfully carried the bags inside, thanking God with every trip. Finally, unable to contain her curiosity, the secretary asked, Don't you want to know who sent all this? The woman smiled warmly and replied, Oh, there's no need. The secretary looked puzzled. The woman continued, When God decides to provide, it doesn't matter who delivers it. Even the devil has to do his errands. An elderly watchmaker took his antique pocket watch to a repair shop because he couldn't polish the glass properly anymore. He explained that his hands had become shaky over the years, making it impossible to keep the watch steady. The repairman smiled, reached into a drawer, and handed him a small rubber grip. He told the old man to hold it tightly while polishing so his hand would stay firm. After the watch was sparkling again, the watchmaker grinned and said it was the best cleaning job he'd managed in years. Then he asked, Out of curiosity, what if I accidentally swallowed this little rubber grip? The repairman shrugged and replied, Just bring it back in a couple of days. That's how we usually get them back. A thief slipped into a quiet antique shop after closing time. He moved carefully between the shelves, using a small flashlight to search for anything valuable. Suddenly, a voice came from the darkness. Captain knows you're here. The thief froze. He switched off his flashlight and stood perfectly still. After a few seconds, he slowly relaxed and continued searching. He had just opened a locked display cabinet when the voice came again, louder this time. Captain is watching you. The thief spun around and swept his flashlight across the room. Finally, the beam landed on a colorful parrot sitting inside a cage. You said that? The thief whispered. Yep, the parrot replied. I'm just warning you. He's watching you. The thief sighed with relief. Oh, so you're the one talking. What's your name, little bird? General, the parrot squawked. The thief laughed. General? What kind of people would name a parrot General? The parrot slowly looked toward the dark hallway and said, The kind of people who name their Rottweiler. Captain? During a staff training session, a manager called Daniel over after reviewing his project report. Daniel, he said, I have a feeling you've been copying someone else's work. Daniel looked shocked. Copying? You'll have to prove that. The manager smiled. Well, the first question on the report was, What is our company's main goal? Emma, who sits beside you, wrote, Increase customer satisfaction. And you wrote, Increase customer satisfaction. Daniel shrugged. That's obvious. Everyone knows that. Fair enough, said the manager. The second question was, What is our most important product? Emma wrote, The premium package. And you wrote, The premium package. Daniel nodded confidently. I studied the company handbook last night. The manager sighed. Okay. But then we reached the third question. What time did the CEO arrive at the office yesterday? Emma wrote, I don't know. And you wrote? Me neither. A wealthy businessman was visiting a big city for the first time. He had heard people bragging for years about how advanced the city was, and he was excited to see everything for himself. On his final day, he grabbed a taxi to the train station. As they drove through downtown, a brand new sports car suddenly raced past them. The businessman leaned toward the window and said proudly, "Wow! Ferrari, very fast! Made in Italy!" A few minutes later, another expensive car zoomed past. He pointed excitedly and said, "Lamborghini, very fast! Made in Italy!" Soon after, a sleek Maserati flew past them. Again, he smiled and said, "Maserati, very fast! Made in Italy!" By now, the taxi driver was getting slightly annoyed, but he said nothing and kept driving. Finally, they reached the train station. The driver pulled over and calmly said, "That'll be $250. The businessman stared at him. $250? That's very expensive. The taxi driver smiled and replied, "Meter, very fast. Made in Italy." An elderly man went to see his doctor for his yearly checkup. The doctor asked, "Is there anything unusual you've been worried about lately?" The old man nodded. "Doctor, during the winter, a young woman from my neighborhood came to my house. She was frightened because her apartment had lost all its heating, so I let her stay in my spare room." The doctor smiled. "That was very kind of you. You have nothing to feel guilty about." The man looked embarrassed. "Well, there's more, doctor. She became very comfortable staying at my house. She started coming over several times a week. Sometimes even twice on Sundays." The doctor paused. "Well, you're both adults. If everyone was happy with the arrangement, I wouldn't worry too much about it." The old man sighed with relief. "Thank you, doctor. That makes me feel much better." Then he leaned forward and whispered, "One last question." "Of course," said the doctor. "Should I tell her the heating has been fixed?" A few minutes before a small-town diner closed for the night, the customers were sitting around chatting quietly. Suddenly, a notorious mob boss walked through the front door. Everyone froze. People whispered, dropped their coffee, and hurried toward the exit. Within seconds, the diner was almost completely empty. Except for one elderly man. He remained in his booth, calmly finishing his pie. The mob boss walked over and asked, "Do you know who I am?" The old man looked up. "Sure do. Aren't you afraid of me?" the mob boss asked. "Nope. You realize I could have you thrown out of town with one phone call? Wouldn't doubt it. I could make your life miserable for the rest of your days." "I know." The mob boss stared at him, completely confused. "And you're still not afraid?" "Nope." Finally, the mob boss asked, "Why not?" The old man smiled and said, "I've been married to your sister for 48 years. Two hikers were exploring the countryside when they discovered a huge, dark hole beside an old barn. Curious, one of them picked up a small stone and tossed it inside. They waited. Nothing. "That must be really deep," one said. "Let's try something heavier." They found a large rock nearby, carried it over, and dropped it into the hole. They listened carefully. Still nothing. Now they were completely puzzled. A little farther away, they spotted an old wooden bench lying in the grass. They struggled to drag it over and finally pushed it into the hole. Not a sound. Suddenly, a sheep came racing out from behind the barn at full speed, flew past them, and jumped straight into the hole. The two hikers stared at each other in shock. A few seconds later, an old farmer came walking toward them. One of the hikers called out, "Excuse me. Did you lose a sheep? We just saw one come running out of the field and jump straight into that hole." The farmer scratched his head and shook his head. "No, that couldn't have been my sheep. My sheep was tied to..." A man went to the doctor's office to get a double dose of Viagra. The doctor told him that he couldn't allow him a double dose. Why not? Asked the man. Because it's not safe, replied the doctor. But I need it really bad, said the man. Well, why do you need it so badly? Asked the doctor. The man said, My girlfriend is coming into town on Friday, my ex-wife will be here on Saturday, and my wife is coming home on Sunday. Can't you see? I must have a double dose. The doctor finally relented, saying, Okay, I'll give it to you, but you have to come in on Monday morning so that I can check you to see if there are any side effects. On Monday, the man dragged himself in, his arm in a sling. The doctor asked, What happened to you? The man said, No one showed up. Cinderella was now 75 years old. After a long and happy life with her beloved prince, who had since passed away, she spent her days peacefully rocking on the front porch of her little cottage, watching the world go by. Her only companion was her faithful old cat, Alan. One sunny afternoon, the fairy godmother suddenly appeared. Cinderella, she said. Cinderella smiled in surprise. Fairy godmother! What are you doing here after all these years? The fairy godmother replied, My dear, you've lived a long, kind, and generous life since we last met. I think you've earned a reward. Today, I'm granting you 3 wishes. Cinderella's eyes lit up. After thinking for a moment, she said, For my first wish, I'd like to be richer than I ever dreamed possible. With a wave of the wand, her worn wooden rocking chair turned into solid gold. The cottage transformed into a magnificent estate, and Cinderella gasped in amazement. Alan the cat leaped from her lap and darted to the corner of the porch. Oh, thank you! Cinderella exclaimed. The fairy godmother smiled. And your second wish? Cinderella looked down at her wrinkled hands. I wish I were young and beautiful again. Instantly, the years melted away. Her silver hair returned to golden blonde, her wrinkles disappeared, and she was once again the breathtaking young woman who had captured the prince's heart decades earlier. She laughed with delight as she felt youthful energy return to every part of her body. The fairy godmother nodded. You have 1 wish left. Cinderella glanced over at Alan, still nervously crouched in the corner. I wish my faithful old cat could become a handsome young man. The fairy godmother waved her wand one final time. In a flash of sparkling blue light, Alan transformed into an incredibly handsome young man. He was so strikingly handsome that birds seemed to stop singing just to stare at him. The fairy godmother smiled. My work here is done. Enjoy your new life. With another flash, she vanished. For a long moment, Cinderella and Alan simply gazed into each other's eyes. Then Alan slowly walked over, wrapped his strong young arms around Cinderella, leaned close to her ear, and whispered, I'll bet you regret having me neutered. A retired fisherman wakes up one Saturday morning to absolutely perfect fishing weather. After weeks of storms and rough seas, the water is calm, the sky is clear, and there's barely a breeze. But of course, it's Saturday. He had promised his wife he would spend the day helping around the house. On impulse, he decides to sneak away. He tells his wife, I'm going to the hardware store for a few things. As soon as she starts cleaning the kitchen, he grabs his fishing gear and heads for the lake. Nobody will know, everyone thinks he's running errands. Up on a hill overlooking the lake, his fishing buddy watches him arrive. You lied to your wife just to go fishing? His buddy laughs. The fisherman casts his line. Immediately, he catches a huge fish. On the next cast, another huge fish. His buddy shakes his head. You've got to be kidding me. Then the fisherman casts again. The line suddenly jerks violently. He pulls and pulls until an enormous fish breaks the surface, flips into the boat, lands perfectly in the cooler, and knocks the lid shut behind itself. His buddy stares in disbelief. This is the greatest fishing day of your life. The fisherman grins. His buddy looks at him and says, So what are you going to tell your wife when you get home? The fisherman laughs and says, Tell me, who's she going to believe? And if she does, who's going to believe her? A very particular man who worked from home for a large company was suddenly required to attend an in-person company costume party. He was embarrassed about two things he considered his biggest flaws. He was completely bald, and he had a wooden leg. He wanted a costume that would hide both without drawing any attention to them. So he wrote a long, emotional letter to an expensive costume company, explaining his situation and asking them to find the perfect solution. A few days later, a package arrived. Inside was a note. Dear Sir, we read your letter carefully and understand your concerns. We have enclosed a pirate costume. The bandana will cover your bald head, while everyone will assume your wooden leg is simply part of the costume. With a little swagger, you'll look exactly like a pirate. Instead of being grateful, the man was furious. He complained that the costume made both of his problems even more obvious. He immediately wrote an angry letter to the manager, accusing the company of making fun of him. A week later, another package arrived. Inside was another note. Dear Sir, we sincerely apologize for our previous suggestion. After further consideration, we believe a monk's robe would be much more suitable. The long robe will completely hide your wooden leg, and your bald head will make the costume look perfectly authentic. Now the man was absolutely livid. He accused the company of deliberately mocking his baldness. He threatened to leave terrible reviews and report the company to everyone he knew. A few days later, a very small package arrived. There was one final note inside. Dear Sir, please find enclosed a bottle of excellent red syrup. We suggest you pour it over your bald head, let it harden, stick your wooden leg up your butt, and attend the party as a candy apple. The management. Mark wakes up the morning after his company's annual office party with the worst hangover of his life. He rarely drinks, but the fancy mixed drinks had tasted so harmless that he kept ordering another. The rest of the night was a complete blur. His head is pounding when he opens his eyes. On the bedside table are 2 aspirin, a glass of water, and a single red rose. He sits up and notices something even stranger. His clothes are neatly folded. His shoes are lined up by the door. The bedroom is spotless. He slowly walks to the bathroom, takes the aspirin, and then freezes when he sees a huge black eye staring back at him from the mirror. Hanging beside the mirror is a note covered with little hearts and a lipstick kiss. Good morning, sweetheart. Breakfast is ready. I went out early to get everything you like. I love you. Sarah. Completely confused, Mark heads downstairs. On the kitchen table is a hot breakfast, fresh coffee, and the morning newspaper. His 18-year-old son is sitting there. Mark looks at him and asks, Son, what happened last night? His son sighs. You came home around 3 in the morning completely drunk. You knocked over the hallway table and broke it. Then you threw up on the carpet and walked straight into the door. That's how you got the black eye. Mark rubs his forehead. Okay, but why is the house spotless? Why is there a rose beside my bed? And why did your mother make me breakfast? His son starts laughing. Well, Mom dragged you upstairs and started taking your jacket off. You pushed her away and shouted, Leave me alone! I'm married! A woman comes home unexpectedly and walks into the living room, only to find her husband happily entertaining a scruffy-looking stranger. Naturally, she's furious. What on earth is going on? She shouts. You invite random people into our house now? Have you completely lost your mind? Please, her husband says. Just hear me out before you get angry. She folds her arms. You've got one chance. He takes a deep breath. On my way home, I saw this poor guy sitting on the curb. He told me he'd been out of work for months and hadn't had a decent meal in days. So I brought him home and gave him that homemade lasagna from the fridge. You know, the one you refused to eat because you said it had too many carbs. Then I noticed his sneakers were falling apart, so I gave him those expensive running shoes you stopped wearing because you bought a newer pair. After that, I found him a warm jacket, the designer one hanging in the closet that you haven't touched in years because you don't like the color anymore. And before he left, I handed him that fancy travel backpack collecting dust in the storage room. He pauses for a moment. Then he smiled, looked me straight in the eye, and asked, "Do you have anything else your wife never uses?" Two 70-year-old friends, Frank and Charlie, had spent their entire lives playing golf together. Every Saturday morning, without fail, they met at the same golf course. One afternoon, Charlie became seriously ill. As Frank sat beside his hospital bed, Charlie suddenly said, "Frank, we've played golf together for nearly 50 years. I want you to do me one favor. When I get to heaven, find out if there's golf up there." Frank smiled sadly. "You got it, buddy. If there's any way for you to tell me, I'll be waiting for the answer." A few days later, Charlie passed away. 2 nights after the funeral, Frank was fast asleep when suddenly his bedroom filled with a bright white light. "Frank!" Frank sat straight up. "Who's there?" "It's me, Charlie." Frank nearly fell out of bed. "That's impossible. Charlie, you're dead." "I know," Charlie replied. "I'm in heaven." Frank stared into the light. "So, is there golf?" "Oh, Frank, you wouldn't believe it," Charlie said. "There are beautiful golf courses everywhere. The weather is perfect. The greens are always freshly cut. All our old golfing buddies are here, and we're all young again. We play all day, every day, and nobody ever gets tired." Frank grinned. "That's amazing. It sounds perfect." "It is," Charlie said. Frank paused. "But you said you had some bad news too." "What is it?" Charlie sighed. "Frank, you're teeing off this Saturday." A dog lived a long, happy life with an old farmer and eventually passed away. When he arrived at heaven's gates, an angel welcomed him with a smile. "You were a loyal dog," the angel said. "Anything you want, just ask." The dog thought for a moment. "Well, I spent my whole life sleeping on a hard wooden porch. I'd really love a soft, comfortable bed." "Consider it done," said the angel. Poof! The dog was suddenly lying on the softest bed he had ever felt. A few days later, several chickens arrived in heaven after living long lives on a farm. The angel met them at the gates. "What would you like?" The chickens looked at one another. "All our lives we had to run from dogs, foxes, and farmers. If we could have little bicycles, we could travel around without running everywhere." The angel smiled. "Done!" Poof! The chickens were soon happily riding tiny bicycles all around heaven. About a week later, the angel stopped by to check on the dog. He was stretched out comfortably on his beautiful bed. "How are you enjoying heaven?" the angel asked. The dog wagged his tail and said, "Oh, it's wonderful. The bed is perfect. And those little meals on wheels you keep sending over are delicious." Mike says, "Hey, look at that. That woman is waving at me." Tom replies, "Forget it. Don't pay attention to her." A moment later, the woman points toward the entrance of a nearby hotel and motions for Mike to come inside. Mike grins. "Did you see that? She wants me to go in." Tom shakes his head. "Buddy, don't do it." "Why not? What are you so worried about? Just trust me. Stay here." But Mike ignores him, walks into the hotel, and meets the woman upstairs. They're talking in the room when suddenly they hear a car pull up outside. The woman rushes to the window. "Oh no! That's my husband!" Mike panics. "What am I going to do?" "Relax," she says. "I'll tell him you're the new hotel cleaner. Quick, start cleaning." Mike spends the entire day scrubbing floors, cleaning windows, and polishing everything in sight before finally escaping. The next morning, he goes straight to Tom's house. "You won't believe what happened. Her husband came home, so she made me clean the entire hotel all day." Tom shakes his head and says, "I told you not to go. All that cleaning you did? I cleaned that whole place yesterday."